All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Citrus Highlights, news from the city of Citrus Heights. Today, we are talking about a very exciting topic, the American Rescue Plan Act, and what it means for the city of Citrus Heights. So today we'll be discussing the amount of one-time federal relief funds that our community is set to receive, the rules around those dollars, and give insight into the exciting first steps that our council has already unanimously approved to support our police department. So thank you everyone for joining us. Throughout the interview, I'll be tracking the comment section. So if you have questions for either expert here today, please go ahead and chime in the comment section and we'll take those at the end. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Bill Zenoni, who's got the longest title right now, Interim Administrative Services Director and head of the city's finance team. And then we're also talking today to Chief Ron Lawrence of the Citrus Heights Police Department. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So to kick us off, we love a good acronym in government. So we'll be talking about ARPA because that's easier to say than American Rescue Plan Act. But Bill, I was hoping you could just start us off by explaining what ARPA is, what its purpose is, and then kind of go into the amount that Citrus Heights is set to receive.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. So the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 was actually signed by President Biden back on March 11th, so several months ago. And this legislation amended technically Title VI of the Social Security Act by establishing two funds, the Coronavirus State and the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. And the purpose of these funds is to provide assistance to state and local governments throughout the United States in responding to the impacts of the COVID pandemic on communities, residents, and businesses. So this legislation that was approved provided a total of $1.9 trillion in fiscal recovery funds nationwide. That's a lot of money, but of that total $1.9 trillion, a piece of it, $220 billion, was allocated to all of the state governments in the United States, and $130 billion was allocated amongst all of the cities. So these are one-time funding, which we have to spend within the next 3.5 years. So we have a window where we have to spend this money, which is by December of 2024. And what the strong recommendation of the federal government is that we avoid using this one-time money for creating new programs or increasing existing programs, which might require ongoing fiscal support that we wouldn't be able to maintain. So of that $130 billion that went to all cities, 15.6 million was allocated to the city of Citrus Heights. So that's our good news. We got a one-time infusion of $15.6 million. Although the legislation was approved back in early March, it wasn't until May the 10th, which was a Monday, that the U.S. Treasury actually released their preliminary guidelines and allowed government agencies to apply for the funding. So we actually, that Monday afternoon, submitted our application for the city, and we were one of the first cities to receive funding. So we received the first half of our allocation. We received $7.8 million on May 19th, and we'll hopefully get the second half in May of next year.
That's
So
exciting.
What we've got. Yep.
Sure, that's exciting. So we were the first to apply, one of the first to apply.
One of the first to apply.
First to receive, and that seemed so exciting, but it was a little bit of a pump the brakes move moment when your team also got the interim guidelines for
Yes.
how these dollars can be spent. So I think of ARPA dollars very similar to like grant money. Like it comes with just super specific guidelines. And in this case, the US Treasury has really provided a lot of information. Could you talk to us about the rules behind the spending, maybe some of the eligible expenses? And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to screen share for our audience so they can see the robust instructions, guidelines, if you will, that
And I think
came
what you're
with
going to do is screen share is of this, right? This,
exactly. So you can see
so
we've actually got 151 pages here.
So as I said, the legislation was approved in early March. It took about 2 months for the Treasury to come up with this first set of preliminary guidelines, which is 151 pages long. So this is their first preliminary set of guidelines.
Okay.
This provides a general overview of why the funding was issued, what it can be used for, and then the reporting that we have to do. We have to track very closely what we spend this money on and report back to the federal government, because if we either don't spend it all by the date that it's supposed to be spent, or if we spend this money on anything that's not an eligible expense, they want the money back.
Sure.
So we have to be very careful that we follow these guidelines. So these preliminary guidelines allow 4 categories. You want to go
Okay.
into those, or?
Yeah, let's go into those. I'm sure it's hard to synthesize 151 pages, but
Out of this 151 pages, buried deep in all of these in this document are 4 general guidelines as far as what we can spend this money on. 2 we believe don't really apply or are not as applicable to the city of Citrus Heights as the second and the third, or the third and the fourth category. So the first 2 are providing premium pay, and also funding investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The city doesn't, those aren't services that the city currently provides. So we believe that the third and the fourth category are the ones that most apply to the city of Citrus Heights. So the overarching goal of the American Rescue Plan Act is to provide support to government agencies in responding to the negative impact caused by COVID. So there should be, as much as possible, a nexus to the impact of this COVID pandemic. So the third and the fourth categories that we're focusing on are government, the negative impact of COVID, either on the city itself or on our local businesses. And then the other category is the one that is still to be defined, that we are following very closely and waiting for further guidance on, and that is for government services, funding government services to the extent of lost revenue over the period of the COVID pandemic. And
sure.
have not clarified that piece yet.
So kind of impact on the local economy, kind of making that whole, and then also just supporting community services.
Right.
As kind of general summary of the last 2 applications we feel
Yes.
are for us. So
Correct.
within those 2 applications, I know that in addition to applying for the money, getting the money, we also were kind of one of the first municipalities to make and invest the funds. So we kind of have decided on a 2-phased approach, right, for ARPA
Yes.
spending here in Citrus Heights. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what our phase 1 was and what phase 2 looks like, and why that's exciting for us in
Sure.
Citrus Heights.
This is actually great news for us. We went to City Council on June the 10th, reviewed received a presentation and actually discussed the city's ARPA funding. And at that meeting, we talked about a proposed action plan with two phases. One of the immediate needs that we identified in our city is the public safety staffing. Because of fiscal constraints, we have had to hold 28 positions vacant in the police department during this pandemic. And so what we discussed with the city council and what the city council subsequently approved was for the first phase to allocate $5.3 million of this $15 million total funding for restoring 22 positions in the police department. And that will fund these positions for that. We're on a 2-year budget. Our budget period goes from July 1st to June 30th. So this $5.3 million of ARPA funding that the council allocated as phase 1 will fund 22 positions, restoring 22 positions in the police department for these next 2 years.
That's so exciting. So I remember you explained it a lot, still unknown about the interim final guidelines from the U.S. Treasury, but that this one use was very clearly defined, bringing back staffing to pre-pandemic levels. So it was exciting that we could move forward and that council unanimously approved that. I know it's only 22 of the 28 positions, but still exciting. And then talk to us a little bit about what phase 2 will look like. I know that that's not as clearly defined, but
that's right. We're waiting for further guidance from the Treasury, which we hope we're going to be receiving in the next month or two. We were very confident that restoring public safety staff met the criteria for the first phase. So what our intent is, and what the city council has discussed, is the second phase will be more of an ongoing, as more information becomes available as far as what this additional funding can be used for, as far as eligible expenses. We are internally within the city looking at what our potential needs are. I believe there's an intent to do some public outreach, for example, this discussion today, but receive input from the community as far as what the needs are, how the community and businesses in our community have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. And then the goal would be probably in several phases or steps, but return back to the city council with recommendations for potential uses within the city and within the community for these remaining funds.
absolutely. So phase 2 is kind of ongoing, further
Yes.
defined. We know it will involve a lot of community engagement and feedback. We already do a lot of surveying of our community. We have flash vote. And so we knew that our community prioritized public safety. In a flash vote done in May, it was the number one priority for our residents, restoring public safety. So it was just so great that we could take immediate action on that, and it was unanimously approved. So that was really exciting. But I know that came with a lot of hard work from your team, Bill. So on behalf of everyone at the city, thank you so much for interpreting those guidelines and, proposing, along with City Manager Chris Boyd, such a great budget amendment to support our PD team.
Thank you.
So we'll have you stick around because I'm sure we'll have questions for you, but I feel like this is a good chance to segue over to talk to our Chief of Police, Ron Lawrence. And for those of you watching, if you're just joining us, we're live talking about the American Rescue Plan Act with our city's Chief of Police and Interim Finance Director. So if you have questions about our federal relief funds, please go ahead and type those into the comments section. So now we'll segue over to you, Chief. So we'll just kind of outlined the two phases of our ARPA funding. And it sounds like you guys might be busy working on recruiting over there. Tell us what the Citrus Heights Police Department has been up to since our budget amendment to restore those 22 positions.
Well, respective to this funding, I too want to thank Bill Zenoni and the finance department, and of course our city manager, who I work closely with to pull this off. It was a lot of hard work. City council for their unanimous approval to fund the police department, and my staff. Frankly, we navigated through these very difficult budget times by holding 22 positions vacant, and that's challenging when we already operated in a lean staffing model. So we were still able to successfully combat crime and keep our community safe despite the lower levels of numbers, but it wasn't easy. And I really want to thank my team for all of their hard work through all of that. Very excited about this. Our team has been very quickly trying to hire as many people as we can, but it's not about fast hires, it's about quality hires. Our Citrus Heights Police Department is known for very top quality service, and you can't get top quality service unless you hire top quality people. And so this takes time, and any type of police hiring takes longer than you might imagine, with the hiring process and the background, the thorough police background that has to occur. If it's a sworn position, of course, there's psychological examinations, there's medical examinations, drug screening, all kinds of things, a lie detector test, a polygraph. So there's a whole litany of things that people have to go through to get hired by the police department. So really, this isn't like flipping a switch and just throwing the help wanted sign out front and hiring people. It's really a long process, and 22 positions, we likely won't have those filled until sometime between now and the end of the calendar year. But my team is very feverishly working to get them hired. We had several folks that were already prepared to be hired. They were already in the background process. So we've already hired out of those 22, maybe a half a dozen people, most of those police officers, because not all of the 22 were sworn officers, by the way. Only about 14 of those were sworn officers. But the rest we've got in professional staff, which are equally important. You've got to have record staff. You have to have 911 dispatchers. We have to have our crime scene investigators. All of that makes a police department. Animal control, code enforcement. We have to have all of the moving parts to make this work and to keep our communities safe. But been very busy to that end, and we'll continue to be busy. And I'll just put in a quick plug. If you live local in Citrus Heights and you're looking for an opportunity to serve your community, we're looking for you. We look for people who have a clean background, people who have empathy, who can communicate, who can problem solve, who can really be concerned about leaving people better than we found them. And that's what our job's all about. So we encourage you to take a look at what we've got to offer and apply if that's your career path.
Absolutely. Well, great pitch. And if you're watching this and you're interested in the open positions with the PD, we will drop some helpful links into the comments section. But I did want to take a quick moment to screen share. I totally understand that it's not a flip the switch and we've got our 22 positions filled, but this looked like an exciting day. And if you're tuning in on the city's page and you're not already following our police department, they have their own social media channels. So facebook.com/Citrus Heights PD, if you want to check out some of the awesome things that they share. So Chief, walk us through this day. What was this like?
Sure. This is me swearing in. That's 5 new police officers. And the closest one in the picture there on the left is Dave Jones. I was promoting him to sergeant. So that's swearing in 1 new sergeant and 5 new officers. That's Dave Jones there. I'm handing him his sergeant's badge. It was a proud moment. David Jones has been a member of our department for a long time. He's been a corporal for a while now. And so getting that 3rd stripe as a sergeant, which makes him a supervisor, by the way, is well earned and well deserved, and very proud of him.
That's awesome. So I know we want to set the expectation. It was exciting to bring on these officers immediately after the amendment to the budget, but because of the culture and just looking for the right people, I understand it may take through the calendar year to fill the rest of those positions.
Yeah, and that's for good reason. We're very picky about who we bring into this organization. Every police department's different. even though the public's perception is policing is the same. Well, it's the same business, but it's very different. It's almost like grocery stores, if you will. You can have Costco, Safeway, Sam's Club, Rayleigh's, Bel Air. They're in the same business, but they're very uniquely different. And our police departments are uniquely different as well. Citrus Heights Police Department is very tailored to our community first. We put our community first, and we work with our community to police this city. This is a unique situation here, and so we have to hire people that are very in tuned to our vision and our expectations and our philosophies. And so that takes a while. We don't just hire anybody out of the police academy or somebody who wants to be a dispatcher. We have to hire the right people.
Absolutely. So, beyond the individual positions, I was wondering if you wanted to take an opportunity. You talked about the community approach that you take to policing, and I know that simultaneously you're going through a little bit of a reorganization. So, those who attend maybe their neighborhood area meetings might be familiar with POP officers. Do you want to talk a little bit to our audience about what that structure will look like going forward?
Sure. I mean, any good leader takes opportunities to look at their organization and reorganize as time goes on. That's critically important because things shift, priorities shift, the community's expectations shift. And right now in our world, crime rates shift, and we have to pay attention to what's important in this era, this time. So right now, we're really focused on making sure that we keep a good handle on crime. We've done a very successful job at lowering crime over the last several years. In fact, historically, since we became a police department, we've lowered crime every year. And the last 3 years have been at historic lows. So I want to maintain that low crime rate. That's what will change and continue to build a reputation of this city. So if we can maintain our low crime rate, that's a focus for us. And homelessness, of course, we want to make sure that we work on quality of life issues, blight issues, shopping cart recovery, for example. When we see shopping carts around our city, I want a team that's able to go around and pick those up and retrieve them and send them back to where they belong, whatever business it belongs to. Making sure that we have outreach to our homeless population, getting them into the right services to those that will avail themselves of that. And those that are committing illegal crimes like illegal camping, we're going to hold them accountable, and we want to make sure that we're keeping our city blight free and safe and getting people into the right services that they need to. So that's where our focus will be, and I'm excited to say that the reorganization will be around those community expectations, and we get those from our community. So it's forums like this where people can ask questions, or they can email me, or we go to the neighborhood association meetings and they can express their concerns, and we listen. And that's important. Any good police chief listens to their community and understands the expectations.
Absolutely. Well, we're so lucky to have you, Chief, and your team, and the high quality of service that you deliver and the high standards that you have. I know our community feels that. So thank you. And thank you for just going through, few changes with the ARPA dollars and speaking to what you guys are working towards, which is really hearing from our community and responding to their needs. So along those similar lines, we want everyone who's tuned in today to stay connected. So please follow the city, follow the Facebook pages, tune in online. We'll be sharing news about the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as our recruitment efforts, continuing to listen to the community. So you can go to citrusheights.net/stay connected to get all those links where you can plug in with us and give us your feedback. So speaking of feedback, we did collect a few questions from the community. And if anyone watching live has any more, please feel free to chime in. So the first one, Bill, I feel like this one's more for you. We had a question around the areas that the ARPA funds can't be used for. So could you speak to that?
Sure, that's a good question. While it's not totally clear what we can't spend the money on, the federal government did make it very clear a couple of categories that we couldn't. These are Rescue Plan Act funds, and they're intended to restore or re-stimulate the local economy. So the examples that they gave that we cannot use these dollars on is putting money into a pension fund to help fund the unfunded pension liability. We cannot use these dollars to restore the city's reserve funds. And we can't use this money to pay principal and interest on outstanding debt. So those were the three specific examples that they gave that we could not use this ARPA funding for.
Awesome. Yeah. So they've got to be spent on like community support, economic recovery, and
Government services that we might provide, that something, yes.
perfect. Awesome. And I know that a lot of people in Citrus Heights are very passionate about fixing our roads, which is a huge, huge cost. So initially, when we shared the amount of money we were getting, our community kind of rushed to like, obviously, we want to support our police department and our local services, but also filling potholes. So can you, I know it's a little nebulous at this point, but could you talk to us what that might look like?
Sure. I mean, clearly, as I said before, these dollars are intended to be to addressing the fiscal impact of the COVID pandemic. So that's the main intended use of these dollars. And so that's what we have to focus most of these funds on. There is one piece of this, and one of the four categories that we talked about was making up for lost revenue. And that is the portion of the funding, which we believe is going to be a fairly small portion of the overall $15 million. But that piece, we are waiting for further guidance from the federal government on how that is actually calculated. Once that amount is calculated, that we believe fairly small amount, we have more flexibility as far as what we could spend that on. So theoretically, that piece, a portion of that could be used to fund some street repair work. But again, the identified need for street improvements or street repairs in Citrus Heights is in the magnitude of $7 to $12 million a year ongoing. These are one-time dollars, and we're talking a very small amount, but that would be an option for a piece of this.
Absolutely. If only we had like pandemic caused potholes, then
We
maybe
had this money every year, and it was
Yeah.
for whatever we could use it on, but it's very restricted. And again, it's one-time money. So it unfortunately will not solve that issue.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I know there'll be more to come there on that piece of the puzzle. So we'll continue to communicate that out. So Chief, we have another question. This one's for you. They are asking about, so the ARPA funds are, the first phase is being used to support staffing, 22 of your 28 vacant positions for the next 2 fiscal years. So they're asking beyond that, what are the plans to support our police department?
Well, even before the pandemic hit, the city staff has been telling council and the community that we've had a budget structure issue from the very beginning. We knew that at some point after the city incorporated in 1997, that at some point there would be a crossover where expenditures would outpace revenues. And that time has come. It came a few years ago. And so the pandemic just added misery on top of that. While the ARPA funding is fantastic and it's a great gap filler for us for 2 years, there is a concern about the future and what that looks like 2 years from now. And despite our best efforts, this city government runs extremely lean, very conservative, fiscally conservative, and we make sure that we only spend money on what we have to provide the services that we do. And we can cut places, we can trim services when times are lean, but frankly, times have been lean for some time now. So the city ultimately in the future is going to have to find an alternative resource for funding. There's no way around it. After this ARPA funding runs out, city government's going to have to find a way to maintain the services or cut services. That's another option, is if we want to go back to cutting the police department, because we're 2/3 of the general fund budget is the police department. So there's not a whole lot of other places to cut. And so the city's going to have to make some very tough decisions.
Absolutely. Well, good answer to a tough question. Thank you, Chief. And you bring up a good point. I think it's important to know that in cities like ours, the most common expense from the general fund is police staffing. It's common. And that, when we held those 28 positions vacant, it wasn't like we were cutting the police department's budget. It was you guys still had 70% about of our general fund expenses. It's like the same piece of the pie, just a much smaller pie if we don't have those revenue sources. So we did get a couple more comments. It looks like we addressed quite a few of them. Outstanding support. I want to thank Angelina, Joan, David, John, April, everyone who tuned in today, expressing support of using our ARPA dollars for our police department. We're excited to hear that is aligned with our community's priorities as we thought from our surveying. And it was just a really great opportunity to move quickly to bring those staffing levels back up. We do have one question, and it's about other outside spending. So the city's been talking a lot about some of our public works construction season posts. So Angelina, I did want to let you know the barrier, the median on Greenback Lane, was funded from a completely different source, which brings up a good ending thought to all of this. While we're so excited about our ARPA funds and the city getting included in this federal relief money, it's one-time funding, as Bill Zenoni explained in the beginning, and it comes with extremely nuanced and specific guidelines on spending. So the more we can do to educate our public on those guidelines, the more we can prime everyone for giving us feedback and, maybe supplying some ideas on where the funding can go. So we'll continue to listen to our community. We'll continue to educate everyone. Bill and Chief, any final thoughts you want to add before we close out our discussion today?
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. I think this is great to get the word out there, and I think the more input we get, we appreciate that.
And I'll just say on behalf of the men and women of the Citrus Heights Police Department, we absolutely adore this community. We appreciate your support. We know that public safety is a top priority, and we're there for you. We work with you in keeping our community safe.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time today, and thank you everyone who tuned in. Again, we appreciate you coming out here and getting educated. Please stay connected to us, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.